Hey, how's it going? Welcome to my channel where I discuss things Android related and other coding related ideas. So, today, without further ado, I am going to be talking about a crossover between two different programming concepts, one specific to Android and one not so specific and more generic. So, I'll be talking about the idea of the composition local, which is a way of providing a value to several subcomponents of a composition hierarchy very easily, so you don't have to pass a ton of parameters through a very long, deep nested sequence of call chains. Very useful to keep your code cleaner and more manageable in Jetpack Compose, because we all know that Jetpack Compose can actually get quite out of hand in terms of the tree hierarchies, and the last thing you need is a parameter sprawl. So composition local can help do that. I've heard some controversies about using composition local, but we do it anyway when we use local context.current and other pre-built composition locals that are available to the system, including ones around local metrics and getting screen size, etc. So we'll be defining a custom composition local, and I will also be just going over a very simple factory pattern example to combine with this. So if everybody remembers what the factory pattern is a creational pattern that lets you create objects without having to instantiate them through the standard use of a constructor. So factory is very good for creating a bunch of different objects. So if you just need to pass a type of object to sort of a central hub or the factory, which then outputs a template of those objects or a copy of those objects. If you don't need too much parameter specification, the very basic straightforward factory is probably a good pattern for you to implement in your coding. And it's one of the standard gang of 4 creational patterns that was available from long when yonder. So without further ado, let's start making some stuff. So I have my Android screen here available, and the first thing what I'm going to do is actually create my factory. So I'm going to create a widget factory. Okay, widget factory. Okay, and this widget factory is basically going to produce a button. So this is an interface because this is my generic factory, and this factory is meant to be subclassed by concrete factories. So this is the abstract factory, not to be confused with the abstract factory pattern, which we'll talk about at another point, but this is the abstract factory, meaning that it's not going to have any sort of concrete implementations, but we are going to have methods which the concrete implementations will override, and we are just going to have one method for this factory pattern here. So this is going to be a method just to create a button in Compose. So it's essentially a overridable composable function. Okay. So with that, we are going to create 2 different factories. Okay, I'm going to create a so-called light factory, which will subclass the widget factory. And this light factory is going to we're going to use a light mode button here. Okay, so this is just, prototype code. We're not intending to use the actual light mode, dark mode colors here. This is just to demonstrate sort of the use of the factory pattern. So we are going to use the button defaults for the colors, button colors, and container color gives us the color of the actual button. And we're going to say for the light mode factory, the container color is going to be white, not black. Okay, and so this will manifest in the text label. And the text label itself is going to have white text because we are a black button on, black text. We're a white button background with black font. Okay, And that's the light mode factory. Then we're going to create what might be obvious to some at this point, a dark factory. Okay, and we're going to use the same widget factory. And I'm just going to copy everything over and invert the colors. So I'm going to invert the color for the background for the container, which is going to be black for the dark mode, and going to invert the text color, which is going to be white. Simple as that. Now, that's the basic factory pattern. So we could use this as it is right now to create our buttons, but I want to demonstrate to you, as I mentioned before, the use of the composition local. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new composable, and we're going to call it screen. Okay. Now in this screen we're going to put our button. But before we do that, we need to actually create the composition local provider for our object that's going to be provided to our composable tree. So we are going to create a local widget factory, and the local widget factory is going to be our composition local value that we are able to access pretty much anywhere within the hierarchy that we specify that composition local is provided for. So we're starting with the default static composition local, and the actual value, if we need to template this, is going to be of a type widget factory. Let's start with, let's give it a light factories as the default. Some of you have a default as dark mode and won't hold it against you. And then now I will just demonstrate to you in this screen how we can use the composition local very easily. So now we have our static composition local provider. We need our dynamic provider, which is going to give the identity to the composition local, and all the other things in the UI hierarchy that are below it or within its scope. So first we take our local widget factory and we do provides. So provides is going to be populated by a particular factory. This is going to be the example here of what we're going to give, the value that we're going to provide via this composition local to all the sub-objects. So we're going to take a column here, and now what I can do here is I can take my local widget factory and I'm going to create a button. So I will create a button current, and I will create, now you notice this, and I'll create one called test. Now you notice here that local widget factory.current, you've used other composition locals, as I said before, local context.current. All right, that's another example. Local context is already provided way upstream of the composable hierarchy with the actual context, and so that's why it makes it easy to pass a view hierarchy's context through Compose, which makes it very nice. It's actually very, very, very convenient as opposed to hooking a context up through constructors. And so if we were to run this, let's run it. What do we see? We see test. Now all I need to do is turn this to light factory, and there you go. Light factory is there. Now you might be like, what's the big deal? Okay, I'm just changing this value. But let's say I have screen screen 2, then screen 3, and composable. Oops, where did that go? And then we have composable on screen 4 or 3, and let's move all this down here, And let's do should be correct. Composable screen 3, and yeah, and let's do screen here, screen 2. Okay, and then let's say this is just screen here. So in theory, this should still work. Let's do Dark Factory. Run this again. And there you go, Dark Factory. I'm just able to create as many Dark Factory buttons as I want here. And notice that I'm not passing parameters all the way through this hierarchy. If this was severely nested, you'd really want to make sure you didn't need to pass this all the way down through a chain of variables. And this might be in a completely different file, in fact. And this could be hidden out of the way. And as long as your composition local provider was at the root of the hierarchy that you're trying to pass values to, then it becomes very convenient, because I can have one or two places where I put a few parameters, and I can modify those parameters. Like I could, for example, have some value that's modified up here, right? And then have that value passed all the way down through the through the hierarchy, and it's very easy to touch something very deeply nested from very upon high. Now, some people think that that's actually not a great thing, because it's maybe a form of dependency injection, maybe a form of, I've heard it complained about, that I wouldn't want something breaking something very deeply nested in my hierarchy that's from somewhere very far away where I don't know where it's necessarily coming from. And that's what I think canonically bothers some people about the use of composition local, and I've seen that before actually be an issue. So, but for now, I think just wanted to show you some of the utility of it, and hopefully you can make some good use of more advanced composition local and factory pattern combinations. So that's it. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.